Hi, I'm back to tell my story of my second daughter's birth. My name is Lindsay. I recorded a video previous to this about my first daughter's birth. And so this is my CBAC birth, which was also a home birth cesarean. And CBAC just means that it was a repeat C-section, but I had hoped for a VBAC and tried. So fast forwarding 10 to 11 months after my first daughter was born, we got pregnant with my second. Kind of not planned. I kind of was on the fence of if I was really ready. It was kind of a hard time in life, just a lot going on with our careers and financial situation and my mental health. I feel like I was a little not handling things the best, but I was also really excited to get to experience pregnancy and birth again. And so we were excited, and I was excited to return to my same midwife group out of the hospital and talk about VBAC. And I was on the fence if I wanted to have a home birth VBAC or if I wanted to plan a hospital VBAC and have my midwives still do all my care, but they would serve as my doulas in the hospital. And I kind of just went with home birth because I wanted to try that out and get to experience that. And the hospital that my midwives really loved wasn't covered under my insurance, so I went with a home birth, and I was a little nervous. Of course, I have to go through all the risks, and that we did that early in pregnancy with mostly rupture, which is like a 1 in 200-ish risk. I would have 20 months in between births at that point, so that was good. But I knew it was a low risk. I was a little nervous. I was like, what would hospital transport look like? And they explained sometimes they can tell if a rupture is happening, sometimes they can't. So I just kind of tried to trust the process. And let's see, that was a hard pregnancy. We had just a lot of sickness that my daughter brought home from daycare that winter. And I was in nursing school. And physically, it was just really a lot harder than my other one. I was way more uncomfortable. Sciatic pain. I had this in my first pregnancy, but it was way worse this time, like rib tightness, like severe rib tightness and pain. I had a really hard time sleeping, getting comfortable this time. I had some blood sugar concerns. My appetite was just awful. So it was hard. It was just a hard time in life. So preparing for a VBAC, I was trying to do all the things, and I did do all the things that I could. But, you can do what you can in the state that you're in. So around 37 weeks, I went for a VBAC consult with an OB at the local hospital, which is like a legally required thing. So she had to go through all of the risks and stuff with me too. And she was pretty supportive of home birth. She had actually had an out-of-hospital birth herself, this OB. But for a VBAC, they want you to be in the hospital because that's the place you can best be treated if you do have a rupture. And I don't even think that it was her she was very open and respectful of my choices, but I started to get nervous just having to reread through everything, like 1 in 200, and I kind of think I pushed it aside, like I said in the beginning of pregnancy, but that started to feel like a lot to me, like 1 in 200, like, yeah, it's low risk, but like 200 people isn't a lot. And I just felt like a little nervous about that, and just kind of still tried to trust the home birth. I had a lot of conversations with my midwife, processing it all, lots of emotional release and crying, and my midwives were so awesome about, like, she was like, you can schedule a C-section if you want right now, and we'll support you and we'll be there, or we'll still be at your home birth. You have to, they're very supportive of making an informed decision for yourself and guiding your own decisions. They never pressured me into anything, but I still just went for that dream of a home water birth. So I got all prepared to that. I had already had my 36-week home check where all the midwives come to the house, and I had everything set up. I had like all of the things, all of the essential oils and the lights and the affirmation cards I had made, and the heating pads and massage oil, and everything was planned out. Who was going to watch my daughter, everything. And so that was really nice, just to be able to go through that hope and excitement. But we had kind of hoped that I would go into labor early because my first was right on time. So I thought I wouldn't go overdue, very likely. And of course I did. My 41-week appointment came, and I started to be like, okay, like, there's 1 week left that you guys are licensed to attend my birth, and like, what's our plan? And I didn't really feel like I wanted to wait until the 42-week mark and then try to be scrambling and then go to a hospital where they're not going to be very open to letting me labor at that point, and wanting to just repeat a C-section. So my intuition was telling me it was time to look at transferring care, as sad as I was to forfeit that opportunity to finally get to birth with these midwives I had grown so close to. My midwife had learned about a hospital that was about an hour away that was supposed to have really good VBAC rates, and it was actually a hospital that was close to where my husband and I grew up, so we felt comfortable with going that way. My midwives still were going to plan to attend my birth in the hospital as my doula, and I also had an amazing doula who I was going to have at my birth anyways, and I had been doing like prenatal appointments with her. She was awesome. So at that 41-week appointment, my midwife called the hospital, spoke with the OB. She was like, wow, she was really nice, she was awesome, she wants to meet you today. So we drove over and had really good feelings about their care, and decided that she did a non-stress test, said, I'm comfortable. She was talking induction because I usually induce by like 41 weeks, especially for a VBAC, and she was comfortable letting us go the weekend, so a couple more days past 41 weeks because everything looked good. And our plan was kind of, okay, if I go into labor, we'll still have the home birth. Otherwise, we'll talk about induction early next week. And she also did offer the option that if I went into labor, we could drive that hour. And that was in the back of my mind as a possibility, but only if I seemed like labor wasn't moving really fast. So the weekend went on. We were getting really anxious. On Sunday, we ended up deciding to call the hospital and asked to be scheduled for an induction. My husband and I had a lot of conversation about like what would be best, or that was on Saturday. We called and scheduled the induction for Sunday, and we ended up going. My friend who was watching my daughter, he took her early, and we went and stayed overnight close to the hospital, hoping maybe that I would go into labor. We did lots of labor induction stuff. That was actually a really special night to just spend alone before we welcomed our second daughter. We tried to like do all of the labor induction things, and thought maybe I'll go into labor at night and we'll just pop over to the hospital and be great. I was having like lots of practice contractions, but nothing ended up happening, but we went through the whole next day and we just hung out in the city, and then we checked into the hospital in the evening. That was weird to go to the hospital this time. Last time I had transferred very much in active labor, and it was really chill to check in, though I was so nervous. Like, it was just all the emotions. When we arrived to the hospital, my husband drove up to the top of the parking garage where you could overlook the city, and this was a really special moment. We just sat, and I don't know if he cried, I cried. I just had like every emotion possible. My husband was born at the hospital that you could see across the river, and it just felt like we were supposed to be here, that our daughter was guiding us here. And you know, I always had the doubt of feeling safe with a home birth, and I think ultimately, unfortunately, that came out late in my pregnancy and left us scrambling a little bit and having to adjust to these big changes in our birth plan. But as much as I really wanted a home birth, I felt safer in the hospital. And this hospital, compared to the little hospital that was over near where we lived, was a higher level hospital where they had 24-hour OR staff. And the OB had explained, you know, even if you rupture, we can react so quickly that we likely can save your uterus and you can go on to have more pregnancies. And I didn't know that that was a possibility. I just thought if you rupture that, you know, you're kind of done. And so then I realized, oh, if I'm in the hospital, that protecting my fertility was really important to me, that I could, that I would just, it aligned with my values a little better. And it was hard for me to let go of that home birth experience I wanted with my midwives. But we were here, and I was really nervous about trauma, like having something traumatic happen to me, just going in and just allowing this birth to unfold and just voluntarily checking in. And it was an induction, which I knew just that cascade of interventions could happen and more things could kind of go downhill. So I was really nervous, and I just wanted to be on the other side of it with a baby, having had my VBAC. But I think I maybe kind of knew that things would be hard, but, you know, tried to be hopeful. So anyways, we checked in. This was April 4th. It was a Sunday evening. And I met the midwife. You know, it was like shift staff, so I would have new staff every 12 hours. So didn't love this midwife, but whatever. She, I told her I really wanted a gentle induction and just give my body lots of time. I didn't want to be rushed. So I really wanted the Foley catheter. They ended up offering me the Cooks as an option that could potentially help with dilation a little bit more. So there's a ball or a balloon on each side of your cervix. So I agreed to that. That was really hard for her to get in. She ended up having to call the OB in, and she was about to give up at some point. And I was in offer Pitocin. I was like, no, I don't want to start Pitocin because I knew that would put me at that higher rupture risk, and that is ultimately what I wanted to avoid. So I pushed for that, getting that catheter, and I was 1 centimeter, which was such a relief. So maybe some of the induction stuff we did help, or some of the practice contractions were helping. So that was a relief because that's the only way that they could put in the catheter. So they eventually got that in. They were so apologetic about like being up in there for so long and working their way around, and it honestly didn't bother me that much. I was just so like channeled in on like opening my cervix and allowing this baby to come down and out. I had done like all of the things as much as I could preparing for this birth, with acupuncture and chiropractor and meditation and just all this physical stuff to just try to open and release. So yeah, they finally got that in, and that's where the fight started. The fight didn't stop there. That was the hardest part about being in the hospital, because I had this text group with my midwives and my doula just to keep them updated, but they were also kind of giving me tips and guidance, and I would ask them like, hey, like, what about this? They're offering this. And it was a great information and resource to have, so that the hospital didn't just kind of like bring me into their processes that I didn't want to be in. But I was stuck in between those two worlds of the out of hospital birth and hospital birth, and I wasn't completely agreeing to what either of them were recommending, and so I just had to fight my what I wanted each step. And with induction, I had gone into planned in this labor to not even have cervical exams, because I knew that would be challenging for me mentally to know how I'm dilated and with how much my first labor, how long it took. So, but when you're induced, it's completely in your head. You have to know your dilation in order to make decisions. And that was really hard. And because I was so far away, my doula and midwives weren't going to come until I was in active labor. So it was all virtual support at that time, which I'm glad that I utilized, because in my first labor, I didn't utilize virtual support like I should have when I went to the hospital. Because of COVID, they weren't allowed. But this hospital had it was still kind of, COVID. It was 2022 spring. So, but my husband was allowed, and I was going to be allowed to have my doula and one of my midwives. So 2 doulas. So we went to bed that night, got good rest, woke up, had breakfast. Then the OB came in, the new OB, who I ended up really liking. She actually ended up being the one to do my surgery. But she was able to pull the Cook's catheter right out. And she was like, great, that's exactly what's supposed to happen. I had been having bloody show through the morning, and I had been having cramping all night and morning. Pretty quickly after they put it in, I was crampy. So she checked my cervix, and I was 4 centimeters. Baby was still high. But that was great progress. I'm updating my midwives, texting them. They're really excited, even with my baby that high, to dilate that much. My body's really good at dilating. My babies just can't get down into my pelvis. So that was exciting. But then it became, all right, you're just here. The catheter's out. What are we gonna do? And I kind of just wanted to chill out for the day, but the hospital really wanted to do Pitocin, and eventually they, explained you're having these contractions, let's essentially enhance them and just get you through this. And I was like, okay, fine. They were gonna start really slow, and then my midwives ended up texting me and being like, you should be going even slower than that. So then I had to fight to change that all day. So the night came, and there was a new OB on staff who I also liked a lot. We had a good conversation with him, sat down, and he really took time to explain what next steps could look like. And I was getting to the point with contractions where I was starting to need to close my eyes and focus in through them, and I felt like I could start to lean into them and almost help my body get into labor mentally as well. So that was really encouraging, and he talked about breaking my waters and what that would look like, and how he would want baby to be a little lower because of the risk of cord prolapse before they did it. He had checked me, and I was 5 centimeters. His cervical exams were really painful. I don't know, they said maybe because his hands were larger, but he would stay up in there while I was having a contraction and really try to feel where my daughter was coming to with a contraction. So I had never been bothered by cervical exams ever until like this point. And so that was where the pain started to kick in. And so I started texting my midwives, like, you know, they're going to want to rake my water soon. Like, what's the situation? And they just were like, you know, you have to be mindful about being on a clock with rupture membrane. And that wasn't really a concern with this hospital. The biggest thing was the baby's position, because once the waters break, they're less buoyant in there and can't rotate as well to get in position to enter the pelvis. So they wanted her at least in LOP, if not LOT. But the OBs don't really do this. I was kind of like, this is the stuck in between feeling, is that I was embarrassed to ask, because I felt like they were just like, it doesn't matter, like, we just get babies out. Like, that's what he explained. I ended up asking about position, and he was like, you know, we work with it, we just get them out, doesn't like matter that much, which, you know. So I just kind of pushed it off and then rested, and he came in a bit, the contractions, I ended up getting in the tub. And this, like in my first labor, being in the tub was like the most peaceful part of my labor. We got everything set up, all the candles. I just got in, I relaxed, and I was listening to my birth playlist and like really just like meditating with each contraction and like feeling that wave and riding it. And that was really awesome. And I got out of the tub, and I started to feel like, okay, I want my nurses to like be in here with me more often, you know, because they would leave us be a lot. And I think I'm going to start needing to have something lined up for pain. And they offered nitrous, which I'd forgot that they had, which I really wanted my first labor and didn't get. So I was like, yes, I want that. So I got that set up. That was pretty helpful for me. And around midnight, I think I went to sleep with that. Like, I was resting, and we did the peanut ball, and, you know, I was rotating and stuff. And then the OB came in around midnight and did a cervical exam. And I had to use the nitrous a lot through this exam, and they were coaching me too, because his exams were so painful. And so I remember hearing through my high like 7 centimeters, and I was like so happy and relieved. Because with my first labor, I had 7 centimeters was when it like things felt like go time. So I was like, all right, we're there again. And then he said, I heard him say, oh, and baby's low enough. She was like -1 station and coming low enough with the contractions that he was like, oh, I can break your water, great. And then the nurse started getting the like thing to break the water, and I was like in my high, like, what is going on? The nitrous wears off like pretty quickly, but I was still like waiting for it to wear off, and I was like, whoa. And my husband's of course sleeping. He in the bed next to me, he's a really heavy sleeper, and I just had to like bring myself out of that high and just be like yell at him to get out and say no. And so that was scary, and he was very respectful, came right out, but I'm like, why would you just, like, I never consented to that. So that's just kind of like why I didn't want to give birth in a hospital, because things like that are just normal. And it's not even that he was a bad doctor, like, he was good in a lot of other ways with things, but that's where I was like, oh my God, I need to protect myself in this labor. And it felt a little more scary. And they left. I woke my husband up, and I was just sobbing, and he felt so bad that he was sleeping through that. So I was like, you need to stay awake for the rest of this. My Pitocin was up in the teens at this point, and I had to fight the night nurse again to stop upping it so quickly. They just seem to be totally fine with upping it, but for especially VBAC, because Pitocin raises your risk of rupture, you should up it slower, so increasing the chance that your body will kick in and you won't even end up needing that high of a dose of Pitocin. And I knew that you max off at 20, And I'm like, so why would we try to get there faster and run out of options? Because at 20, they have to start doing more monitoring, and it gets a little more like dicey. So anyways, at some point soon after that, the nurses were like, you guys should call your midwife and doula to come in. And they were like an hour away, so it took them a couple hours to get there. I remember just laying in bed listening to my husband call them, and I was so relieved that they were coming. And it didn't really feel like long after that the rest of the night just kind of like flew by. Like I felt like, okay, this time my baby's gonna come out. Like the first time I stalled out at 9 centimeters for 12 hours, and this time I just felt like, okay, that's not gonna happen. Like I was able to get this far with an induced labor. Like my body didn't even resist that. So like, this is gonna happen. And then it was just like the night went by, and my midwife and doula got there, and I was using the nitrous I was very attached to it at this point. I like did not want it out of my hand. And they got there and were so gentle and kind to me, and just encouraging me to do whatever I felt like I needed to do, and my body was telling me to do. And at this point, I was feeling so much pelvic pain. That was what was really bothering me. It wasn't even in my stomach. I mean, it was kind of like back labor, like low, my sacrum, but also my pubic bone in the front, because I had another posterior baby, so the wider part of her head was hitting that narrower part of my pelvis. And I just remember it was so painful. Every contraction, it was like my pelvis was being just like split apart, and I could hear it creaking. My nitrous was kind of taken away from me a little bit. I think they were like, all right, we got to get you moving. Like, so I was distanced from that, which was a bit anxiety producing. And part of me wishes that I had just like gotten an epidural sooner, but I know I had good reasons for delaying the epidural so I could move. But I was getting as the sun started to come up, I was just like, what the heck? Like, how have I not had a baby in the night? And felt like there were so many people in my room at this point. The nurse kept asking me, like, because I was saying I felt pressure, but it was on my pelvis, and she just kept being like, where do you feel pressure? And I was like, I showed her, and she wasn't concerned. And I just really wanted her to be concerned where I was feeling pressure, because she was trying to see if I had like rectal pressure, and that would mean baby was like starting to come out, and she had to get the OB. But that wasn't the case. Yeah, I think my Pitocin ended up getting up to like a 16 or an 18, and we were trying to have me go pee often, because in my previous labor I had my bladder had gotten really full, so we were doing that, and it was so hard to get to the toilet and back. And I just like, after I went to the bathroom, I just like fell to the floor. The nurse that I had was amazing. She was like throwing pillows down for me on the floor, like the mattress from the couch, so I could just be there. I was leaning into my husband and hanging off him. He's so amazing in my labors and so present with me. And so I was really leaning into that. I think the baby's waking up, so we'll see how far we get with this. Yeah. So the new OB came in. I was like, great, another shift change. Wanted to do a cervical exam. I was fine with that. And I had to use the nitrous to get through that, because at this point cervical exams were so painful. I think OBs just do them differently too. She announced that I was 7 centimeters, and I just lost it. Like, I was still 7 centimeters after that entire night of laboring, and thinking I was gonna not stall out this time. Baby was negative one station and like a little bit more phase. I was like 70% of phase, so I just like came out of the nitrous high and just was yelling at them to turn the Pitocin off. I was so pissed at the Pitocin. I didn't want it on anymore. I didn't want it to screw up my uterus. I didn't want it honestly, compared to my first labor, was just natural labor contractions, and I honestly don't even think it was more painful. It's the baby in posterior position that's very painful when they just stay posterior. So I later found out that like they checked the suture lines, and she said sutures are transverse to the pelvis, which I later learned was called deep transverse arrest, meaning that she was also acynclitic and stuck posterior, just like my first daughter. And I didn't even know this at the time. I just knew that I thought I was done labor. Like, I just knew that this baby was having the same issue as my first baby, and that's where we were, and I lost hope, most of my hope at that point. But I still had this little bit of hope, like, maybe we can keep going, but it can't be like this. So they turned off the Pitocin, and I just thought, okay, the contractions will stop, and then I will be able to collect myself. I can eat, I can rest, we can pause for a day or 12 hours and like make a new game plan. And of course, the contractions didn't stop. They kept going. They were very painful. They got longer. They got 2 minutes long. They got more spaced out, but 2 minutes long. And I just kept being like, why aren't they stopping? And my doula, my amazing doula, was so hopeful still. She was like, let's get you to the bathroom again. And she was in the bathroom just talking to me like, it's so great. Like, you effaced more. Like, you're still progressing. Like, you can still have this VBAC. And I wanted to be there, but I just wasn't. And I was a little annoyed with her hope, but I was jealous of her hope that she still had. And I just said I need something for pain, and the nurse had offered me either narcotics or the epidural at that point. And I don't know why it was so hard for me to make this decision, but I ended up deciding on the epidural. And my nurse, I remember her asking when I was in the bathroom at that time, she said, what is it about a vaginal birth that you want so badly? Like, not in a derogatory way. She just was like, you know, what do you want? And like, maybe we can help you get there. And I could not answer her. In my mind, I was like, I don't even know. Like, I just want it. Like, I don't know how to explain. Why do I have to explain it? But I've thought about that question a lot in my recovery. So, got the epidural. My doula and midwife and everyone gave us some space, and my husband climbed into bed with me, and we just both sobbed and cried and connected. And we did this in my first labor, where we just like had this moment of like knowing that we needed to agree to a C-section, and grieving that loss of the birth that we had hoped for. And so that was a pretty powerful moment. And yeah, we just kind of knew the OB was still going to come in to explain our options, but we were like leaning towards the C-section at that point, and then had that okay between each other to consent. So the OB came in a bit, so the OB came in a bit later and explained there's plan A. We could repeat C-section now while things aren't emergent, and, you know, I had a C-section like backup birth plan, you know, so they were like, we could try to do as much of that as we could. This OB attending, I did not like. she did not have good bedside manner, but her resident was great. I gotta get the baby. We're back. This is my little CBAC baby, Juniper. So I was talking about the OB giving us the options. So it was a C-section, or we could turn the Pitocin back on, put in an intrauterine pressure catheter, because essentially she was wanting to like quickly, bring back up the Pitocin, potentially go past 20. So then we would have to monitor that the contractions weren't too strong. And break my water and just kind of take it hour by hour. So she wanted to get things rolling, and potentially there could have been a plan C that I could have fought for and utilized my midwives and my doula to fight for. But I was done fighting, and I think that I started getting nervous at this point about rupture. In the back of my mind, I have that like 1 in 200, but I'm getting induced, I have Pitocin, so that's raising risk. I'd been in labor for a really long time, and that's where I'd heard rupture stories was like long, high dose Pitocin for a long time. I mean, that's like statistically a rupture equation potentially. So I, at that point, it confirmed that my future ability to have children, and even if I could have children, that it wouldn't be like a high risk thing. We knew we weren't done after 2. So that just kind of confirmed like we felt earlier, C-section. I actually think we had that like emotional moment in the bed together, just crying after this, now that I'm thinking about it. So the OB did not want to give us time. She wanted us to make a decision on the spot, and this is why we didn't like her. She just couldn't understand why we couldn't just make a decision. She gave us all the information. So that was a fight. Like, kind of like my doula and midwife stood up for us, and we eventually got time, and that's where we took the moment to like process, and even though we kind of knew what our decision was going to be, just to process it and feel right about it going into it. And so I discussed with my midwife doula, like I wanted, like, they were like, okay, so you want a repeat C-section? Like, how do you want it to look? And I was like, I want to wait. Like, I don't want to do it right now. I wanted to rest and like feel better for the surgery, because I just felt so exhausted and so drained. And so they were like, all right, great. Like, when they come back in, we'll like tell them that. And they kind of were worried about the acuity on the floor. Apparently it was super busy, and they could do a C-section now, but later they wouldn't be able to guarantee there was a surgeon available for that. And if something started, like Juniper started having distress signs, and we needed a C-section, that would be more scary. So they kind of coaxed me into just doing it, and I was so done fighting, and I was like, whatever, it's fine, let's just get it over with. So I wasn't even confident I would feel that much better later, but I think in the back of my mind I was like, maybe these contractions I'm having would like progress me by then, but they apparently weren't like effective contractions. So yeah, I specifically asked for it not to be a rushed process. sure, I'll do it now, but we're not rushing. I got really anxious last time when that happened, and they were respectful of that. The resident OB came in and was like, I took a look at birth plan. This is what we can do. This is what we're not able to do, unfortunately. And the things they were able to do were the most important things to me, which was like the skin to skin right away and nursing her right away. And they do like delayed cord clamping, but I have pictures of, and it wasn't even like 1 minute. But you know, whatever. So yeah, we went into surgery smoothly. My midwife went home because I had my doula there, and she was gonna stay. She asked permission to stay, and just be there for when we got out of surgery. And so that was really nice, and it was pretty chill going into surgery. I got really nauseous just from the anxiety and all the meds just kind of being rolled back into the OR. But I remember talking to them being rolled in about how I really liked the green wall tiles. So, and I wanted less anxiety meds this time. Like, I knew I might need them, but I wanted to like try to avoid them because they made me really sleepy the first time. So I succeeded in that. I did end up having to take some because I hemorrhaged during surgery. Not a huge hemorrhage, but I think I lost like up to 1,600 milliliters of blood. Whereas my first surgery, I only lost 700. So that was scary to like be fully aware that that was happening. But anyways, so we got into surgery. They got her out quickly. They had the clear drape. They this time, instead of holding her up in the air, which they did with my first, they like kind of like shoved her up against the clear curtain, which was kind of nice. So she was like looking at us through the drape, and she just looked like we made like deep eye contact, and that's still how she is to this day. She likes her deep eye contact. That's her comfort. So and she did come and do skin to skin with me not soon after, and she did I think mostly just skin to skin and looked at me. My first nurse right away, which kind of makes sense. She loves nursing now. This one's not so food motivated, so she just kind of laid there and just stared at me, and I cried, and she ended up nursing on the way out of the OR, which everyone was really impressed by. I'm like, yeah, obviously I'm gonna do this. Like, I would be doing it if I wasn't in the OR. So I'm really thankful that I was able to do that, nurse them on the table both times. Yeah, so hemorrhaging in surgery was pretty like scary because they started giving me like all these meds to take, like I think misoprostol, like in my cheek, and it was so chalky, and then I was throwing up and like dry heaving, and it just was not a fun surgery, and I don't think I was prepared for that. Like, I just thought I was going in to like have the surgery I had last time, and I don't think I would be as open to and agreeable to a C-section the next time around like that, because now I've had like a harder C-section. There's definitely worse, but afterwards we came out, and my doula was there, and she was so excited, like I was nursing, and so positive, and she didn't stay super long. She just wanted to give us our time, and not soon after that I was just sick. Like, they wanted me to start walking like 4 on the floor. They want me walking 4 hours after surgery. I definitely couldn't do that. I was so nauseous and dizzy, and for like 24 hours, like throwing up. So I ended up walking for like 24 hours. But they finally figured out nausea meds. I don't know if it was like an anxiety thing or a reaction to all the meds wearing off. I'm not sure. but I did not have that last time. Yeah, and let me look at my notes here. Yeah, so hospital stay was pretty chill. My daughter came to, my friend brought my daughter to visit. That was the only visitor we had. We just like to keep things chill in the hospital. And my husband it was a Catholic hospital, so he had like a priest or whatever come do a blessing for her, and I just cried. Yeah, my daughter visited. That was pretty awesome. That was like the moment, like the prize I set my eye on through the whole process of this like birth. And I just was like, I just want to be on the other side of it. I want Maeve to be meeting her, and I wanted to have had my VBAC. So that was something that I obviously didn't get, and I went home and started the long journey of processing that. I'm going to do a video on that too, like what I've learned and come to feel about the births. Thanks so much for listening. I know this one was longer, more complicated, and more fresh in my mind, so more details. Thank you. Bye.